Hi, this is Neil, and I'm partnering with the great HPC Today to bring you the Surfactant Insights Podcast. The theme of this podcast, Petro versus Oleo versus other, might be somewhat misleading as it implies that the three feedstock types are all on a similar footing when it comes to surfactants. Well, they're not. Well over 90% of the mass of surfactants consumed globally come from petrochemical and oleochemical sources. Other, however, should not and indeed cannot be dismissed. There is a keen, some may say desperate need for an other leg to the surfactant supply chain, and a considerable amount of venture capital and time and bandwidth has gone into the search for that other leg. Today, more than ever, and that's not a hyperbole, this topic deserves a very close look. So, let's consider the following. First, there's a risk around petrochemicals as the last 6 weeks in the Middle East has demonstrated. Ethylene, benzene and jet kerosene are the building blocks for ethylene oxide, linear alkyl benzene, alpha olefins and petrochemical alcohols. Let's also not forget the petrochemical origins of sulfur for sulfates and sulfonates and of ammonia for amines. Longer term, pressure on ethylene oxide and bio-based initiatives remain. But having said all that, if you believe that oil prices will revert even just some of the way to pre-war levels, petrochemicals will continue to deliver considerable cost-effectiveness to a huge proportion of the bulk cleaning ingredients. And as many users are beginning to realize, they can have a pretty good carbon footprint. Second, there's also considerable risk around oleochemicals, particularly those lauric oils in the C1214 range, like palm kernel oil and coconut oil. Oil feedstocks are being cannibalized by the energy sector to meet sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel mandates. Compounding this supply squeeze are aging plantations in Southeast Asia and the costs of supply chain auditing required to comply with the EUDR. Palm kernel oil is no longer the cheap, reliable feedstock it was even just 10 years ago. Nevertheless, it remains the best option today for a bulk, renewable commodity that can form the basis of good, cost-effective cleaning workhorses like SLES and SLS, at least for now. So much for Petro and Oleo. What about the other? When looking at this other category, I guess the first thing to consider is biosurfactants made by fermentation. Now, while microbial biosurfactants like sophorolipids and rhamnolipids offer great marketing narratives for consumer preference, their high costs of manufacturing, still mainly batch-based, keep active basis pricing in the mid to high single-digit dollar per kilo range, sometimes higher, and that's still too high for the mainstream HI&I and personal care applications. But look, although these glycolipids have been known since the 40s in the case of rhamnos and 60s in the case of sophoros, it is still commercial early days for the category. There's a lot of room for improvement in the process technology in terms of yields and cycle times as scale and experience builds. Also, the public embrace of rhamnolipids in particular by Unilever in their Sunlight brand in certain markets is quite supportive of this category. Other, however, is not just biosurfactants. For just one example, there's a lot of activity around coupling local agricultural feedstocks with efficient catalytic chemistry and avoiding fermentation altogether. Technologies like the carbohydrate ester platforms, e.g. the saccharide lipid adducts produced by Integrity Biochem and similar players, utilize abundant, price-stable domestic starches and sugars. Because they are produced via continuous or semi-continuous catalytic synthesis rather than in biofermenters, they achieve attractive cost economics and offer tunable HLB profiles. They also offer high alkaline stability and robust detergency. These carbohydrate esters are, by the way, today commercially realized in the tens of thousands of metric ton scale at multiple production sites globally. Finally, I would say that for a surfactant supply chain strategist, it's not about finding a single silver bullet feedstocks, but about building a multi-pronged approach. By integrating scalable, non-petro, non-palm molecules like the carbohydrate esters I just mentioned, or maybe even some of the more developmental carbon dioxide-based surfactants, into base formulations, companies can dilute their exposure to crude oil spikes and lauric oil shortages. Now's the time to start, I think, given our timely reminder that the two current pillars on which surfactants are built, oil and palm, have their share of supply chain problems. Well, I hope you found this useful, and again, thanks as always for listening.